Welcome to Lattes and Llamas Presents Knitting Academy, How to Work a Stretchy Cast On. So today in sock school, we're going to start at the cuff of our sock with a stretchy cast on, which will then lead into the ribbed cuff. To get things started, you're going to want a pair of sock needles and some yarn. We're going to work on the twisted German cast on today, which is one of my absolute favorite stretchy cast ons for the top of a sock. It holds its shape really nicely. It's shown here on this cuff. It's very, very, very stretchy, but then tightens right back up to your leg. Here's that same cast on again, shown now on an undissected sock. It's got a really nice, clean edge. Get right up on there so you can see that. It's got a ton of stretch, but it bounces right back to shape when I'm done stretching it. And I think it just looks really nice and polished. It's just a nice, comfortable way to wear it and a pretty edge when you're done. It also isn't a super bumpy edge, and I don't like the feel of really bumpy edges right against my skin. I want my sock to be comfortable. So let's begin. So starting out with a ball of yarn, I'm going to want a really long tail. So I've pulled a lot of yarn out of my tail, pulling from the ball. This is not a place to be economical with your yarn. You want lots and lots of tail. If you run out of tail during a long tail cast on, you have to start over. And when you're casting on a lot of stitches, that's a huge pain. Have more tail than you think you're going to need. You'll want your sock needles. I'm going to be casting on, holding both needles together, and then when I finish the cast on, I'll pull one of the needles out. The reason I do that is that I am a very tight knitter. I tend to have a very tight tension, and this helps save me from myself so that I don't wind up with a cast on that's knit so tightly that it really doesn't have the stretch that I'm looking for. You want this cast on not to be incredibly loose, but this isn't a place to pull your yarn super tight. If you're a tight knitter like me, cast on over both needles held together. If you tend to be a looser knitter, you can complete the same cast on over just one needle. But I'll be holding them together. So I'm going to start out by tying a slip knot, and that will be the first stitch on my needles. So I've got a slip knot. I'm putting it over both needles. Again, if you tend to be a looser knitter, then you'll go ahead and put it over just one needle. It doesn't matter which needle's on the top and which is on the bottom. We're just using this as a way to make my needle fatter, and I'll pull one of them out when I'm finished. Here I have the tail yarn, it's to my left, and I have the yarn coming from the ball that's on my right. I'm going to work this cast on primarily with my left hand, and I'm going to start by looping the tail yarn over my thumb. I'm holding the ball yarn with my middle finger, and it's coming up over my forefinger. So I'll show you that again. I'm essentially making a finger gun, pew pew. And here's the tail yarn held with my middle finger. Here's the ball yarn. I'm holding it down with the tip of my ring finger. Play around with it until you find a way that's comfortable so that you've got a nice tension on both of these yarns. Again, here's my ball yarn and here's my tail yarn. Tail is coming up over my thumb and then across my hand. The ball yarn is coming up through my hand, over the back of my pointer finger, and up to the needle. Bring the tip of your needle, or in my case needles, over that yarn on your thumb, over the top of it, down and under the yarn. You're almost playing a game of cat's cradle here. Through the middle, and then I'm going to use my pointer finger to make it easy to grab that yarn and pull it through. So let's do that again. Here I've got it, my tail yarn and my ball yarn. I'm coming down through the middle of that loop, and then I'm going to grab the yarn from the ball and pull it through. down and through the loop, and that creates this X right here. What I'm gonna do is use my pointer finger to bring this yarn from the ball up to the upper part of the X, and I'm pulling it through at that upper part of the X. This is not the only way to cast on for socks. It's just my favorite way, and I think it's worth mastering. It's a more complex cast on, but it has a really, really nice result. So I'm going to do a couple more stitches at full speed, and then we'll slow it down again. This cast on is nice for any edge where you're going to want some ribbing and stretch. It's good at the bottom of a sweater. If you're working a bottom-up sweater, it's good at the bottom of a sleeve if you're working a cuff-up sleeve. But it's my absolute favorite way to start a pair of socks. If you're working socks, you're probably going to be casting on quite a few stitches, generally somewhere between 50 and 100, depending on what size and what pattern you're working. And you're going to want to cast on all of the stitches that you need for your pattern, remembering that that slip knot over here was actually going to serve as your first stitch. Some patterns might advise you to drop that slip knot when you get to the end and cast on all of your stitches this way and then drop the slip knot. I honestly don't see a point to that. It's going to disappear completely into your work. The needles get a lot easier to hold together as I go on because now the yarn's holding them for me. And if what just happened happens to you, or my yarn gets caught between my needles, just slip it out and keep going. So what happened there was, as I brought my yarn up, it caught between them, and I started pulling it through. Don't worry about it. Just let go of that stitch and redo it. All right, that was some at medium speed. Let's kick things up into high octane full gear, and I'll show you just a regular cast on. It seems really complicated, and see, here's one where I caught it between the needles. Seems really complicated, but once you get in your groove with it, it's honestly pretty mindless. It's just a matter of teaching your hands to make the motion. And you'll keep going like that until you've cast on as many stitches as your pattern calls for.